Hi, welcome to our EDC 550 presentation. My name is Eileen and I'm working with Dorian. The title of our presentation is called White Knights in Shining Armor, White Saviorism in Film.
So before actually, tackling this issue of white saviorism with film, it is important to assess its sister concept, the white man's burden. Coined by Rudyard Kipling in his aptly named poem, The White Man's Burden is the duty to extend our civilization over a territory belonging to the yellow or red or black man to better the condition of those aborigines. Note that this definition is from the American Review in 1926, and that archaicness is apparent. This ideology was considered an impetus in the colonization of multiple countries in Asia and Africa, including the Philippines. The United States believed that this expansion into the islands would better the conditions and contribute to the civilization of the natives who lived there. As a result, we have the contemporary ideology of white saviorism. As claimed by Bell Hooks, Frantz Fanon, when the whites feel they became too mechanized, they turned to the men of color and asked them for a little human sustenance. And this goes into the modern contemporary ideology of white saviorism.
So we are using this definition of white saviorism to guide us in this theme. This is taken from the book titled Screen Saviors, Hollywood Fiction of Whiteness. And their definition reads as follows: the great leader who saves Blacks from slavery or oppression, rescues people of color from poverty and disease, or leads Indians in a battle for their dignity and survival.
According to Bell Hooks, such a concept allows the dominant culture to make contact with those bodies deemed the other, with no apparent will to dominate, which assuages the guilt of the past. It even takes the form of a divine gesture where one denies accountability and historical connection. So one of the main elements of white saviorism's film is that white saviorism centers the white perspective through the film's protagonist. Through essentialization, the white protagonist takes on the role of a savior in the midst of savagery and the people of color. This is very evident in many film scenes that have a white savior plotline. And as a result, people of color are often relegated to the background role within the narrative until it is deemed necessary for them to act on their own behalf or have agency within the film.
So we decided to look at three particular movies. The first one, To Kill a Mockingbird, then Dangerous Minds and Freedom Riders. Dangerous Minds and Freedom Riders focus in this educational setting. And so we are looking at two white teachers who are the white savior, but then we also thought it was important to broaden up that scope and look at another film that is very popular and is not the education setting, but still portraying this white savior trope.
Mm-hmm. And this film, this film describes, centers the white perspective of a white family and Atticus Finch's crusade to save a black man, Todd Robinson, due to his accusation of him raping and beating a white woman, yet it still centers these white perspectives.
So when looking at particular white saviorism within education in these two films, from this quote, it tells us what we're looking at. So these movies are often biographical, but are very Hollywood produced-esque. And then it suggests that those with the least classroom teaching experience are the ones that are the most successful in inspiring the attention of otherwise unruly and unmotivated urban youth of color, which is exactly what you see with Dangerous Minds and Freedom Riders.
One characteristic of white saviorism in movies is that education is a teacher's quality or qualifications. It is not necessarily the content or pedagogy that they teach. It is just mainly their attributes. And as Lewis and Mano claim in their article, that low-income minority students are disproportionately likely, when compared to their white peers, to be taught by lower quality and uncredentialed teachers, which definitely contradicts the narrative that many of these white savior films push. And we see this in Dangerous Minds of Lou Anne Johnson and her teaching of her students, as well as Freedom Writers with Aaron Gruhl.
Another characteristic we see is just this overwhelming stereotyping of low income and students of color. In both of these movies, you often see this big portrayal of the prison industrial complex. Security in the schools are very present. So with the opening scenes of both movies, they are very similar. With Dangerous Minds, you have Gangster's Paradise by Coolio playing in the background, and you see all these walls with heavy graffiti and a stop sign that is knocked over. And then in Freedom Riders, you open with news coverage of the LA riots of the 90s. And so this is all to set what the students are living in, but it stereotypes them into this world of violence.
So how can we reconstruct this narrative and decenter white perspectives? So there are multiple ways which we can decenter whiteness and reconstruct the narrative around education, which is perpetuated by white savior films. There is counter storytelling, and then Dr. Matthias describes her in her narrative and novel Feeling White, that using counter narratives allows for the decentering of hegemonic perspectives. This can be included within different types of curriculum and pedagogies that centers and uplifts minority perspectives. And then another way we can decenter whiteness is constructive and liberatory pedagogy. And Johnson in his reading showing the love within pedagogy is that humanizing and empowering pedagogies can assist in the humanization of students of color. And also now within Johnson's reading and talking about implicating love within pedagogy, he claims that, he offers the point that humanizing and empowering pedagogies can assist in the humanization of students of color. It also allows for students of color to question the status quo for which they live under. And this is especially considerate due to many of the systematic barriers that many students of color face. And the biggest point of all is constructing a communal classroom that is based on love. This is offering a communal classroom environment where academic striving leads to overall striving and becoming psychologically whole, according to Bell Hooks. And this is especially important because decentering whiteness and decentering white emotionalities requires for all of us, including white people, to be able to deconstruct whiteness and deconstruct white saviorism, so we can include students of color in terms of evolving to a racially just society.
And not just that, but also being in their emotions. And then we lastly have our references. This is page 1 and then page 2. And that is all.